Imagine stumbling across a charismatic man online that is claiming he's the Messiah. He's preaching about nature, spirituality, Black liberation, or even returning to paradise. That sounds intriguing, huh? Now imagine that same man leading a dozen of his followers across countries, controlling what they do, what they eat, who they love, or even what happens if they decide to leave. This isn't fiction. It's a real-life saga of Eligio Bishop, also known as Nature Boy. An ex-barber turned cult leader, built an eco-commune that spiraled into chaos, abuse, and eventually landed him a life sentence in prison. So how did a spiritual movement that was promising peace and purpose turn into one of the most shocking modern-day cult stories? This is the rise and fall of Eligio Bishop. To understand the bishop's journey, one must look at his childhood. Born in Harlem in 1982, his early life was marred by chaos. He said he grew up in the foster care system, grappling with neglect, and that his parents had died when he was too young to remember them. Some details remain hard to verify, but official records confirm that he spent time as a teenager in juvenile detention centers, eventually transferring to an adult prison due to repeated offenses. Upon release, he tried to rebuild his life, dabbling in various lines of work. For a while, he was a barber outside Atlanta, known for his lively debates in his shop that sometimes lasted hours. He was articulate, and customers found his conversations electrifying. Still, trouble never seemed far. In 2011, he was arrested for assaulting a woman he lived with. By the time he entered a plea deal, the woman had written a letter to the court, and he avoided prison. That near miss, Bishop often said, sparked his vow to walk a path, though later events cast doubt on his sincerity. Over time, Bishop found renewed purpose in exploring spiritual dietary philosophies, eventually latching onto the worldview that combined ecological ideas with Afrocentric mysticism. He began calling himself Nature Boy and proclaimed that modern society, especially for Black people, was out of alignment with the Earth's natural rhythm. Social media platforms gave him a growing audience. He told followers that true healing came from immersing themselves in nature, especially tropical climates he believed maximized the powers of melanin. In 2016, Bishop's online presence surged after a video he posted responding to a shooting of Alton Sterling. Another high-profile incident of police brutality had left Black Americans in anguish, and Bishop's view was simple. If the country was so hostile, why stay? A wave of anger and hopelessness rippled through the community. In that space, Bishop's voice resonated. He insisted that Black Americans should leave the United States for the tropics, both to escape oppression and to reconnect with their ancestral roots. For some viewers, this message has a revolutionary allure and made them believe that real freedom might be found somewhere else, far from the daily grind and inequality they experience. Bishop's confidence, delivered in a calm but impersonated tone, convinced them he had the blueprint for liberation. By late 2016, he made the move himself, flying to Honduras with a small group of devout followers. They dubbed themselves Melanation, then later renamed the group Carbon Nation, highlighting their belief in the elemental importance of carbon to life on Earth. The early days in Honduras were filled with excitement, but also confusion. People who joined expected a paradise, and the reality was decidedly less grand. A modest rental house became their headquarters. Yet, for all the cramped conditions, the sense of collective purpose kept them motivated. Members woke at dawn, ate one communal meal, and studied Bishop's teachings on veganism, astrology, and nature-based spirituality. As Carbon Nation expanded, so did their ambitions. They relocated to Costa Rica, settling into a home purchased in a lush green valley. Their social media presence ballooned. Clips showed shirtless men walking through thick forest, women wearing loose sargans, and everyone proclaiming the virtues of living off the land. Bishop preached that melanin, particularly abundant in darker-skinned people, was a conduct for divine knowledge. He encouraged his followers to absorb sunlight daily, arguing that most health and social problems plaguing Black Americans stemmed from living in environments alien to their biology. Members ranged from college dropouts to seasoned professionals. Many were artists, poets, singers, and aspiring rappers who saw an opportunity to combine creativity with communal living. The group devoted serious money to buying instruments, recording gear, and other technology. They produced music videos featuring scenic waterfalls, raw food feasts, and Bishop delivering passionate speeches on the spiritual significance of music. Behind the scenes, conflict arose. Some members chafed at the strict daily schedule. No one could eat or sleep without permission. The single daily meal was shared, and anyone who wanted a snack at another time risked being called selfish or spiritually unenlightened. Though Bishop spoke of freedom, he often enforced an actual regime. Members relinquished bank cards and funds to a common pot administered by the group. Critics would later claim these were classic cult tactics, used to strip recruits of autonomy. Bishop's frequent live streams drew both supporters and alarmed observers. His fiery rants about leaving the US resonated with some, but struck others as radical, even dangerous. His approach to intimate relationships especially unsettled outsiders. Bishop advocated polygamy, and his so-called wives were expected to compete for his attention, apparently to test their loyalty. Occasionally, viewers saw the wives physically fight each other. Some watchers found it deeply disturbing to witness these altercations play out on camera, but the shock value only seemed to boost engagement. Critics began calling Carbonation a cult. Rather than shying away, Bishop often embraced that term, arguing that cult was just shorthand for culture, and that mainstream society used it to demonize any group rejecting the status quo. His knack for turning accusations into affirmations fueled a sense of rebellion among the faithful. The group's social media fan base swelled, but so did the ranks of detractors, who began documenting every questionable or alarming statement Bishop made. Over time, persistent watchers flagged numerous clips to law enforcement, particularly those where Bishop discussed child rearing in ways many found questionable. At one point, he made disturbing claims about being naked around his children. He later tried to clarify, but the damage was already done. Authorities in some regions took the complaints seriously. Costa Rica became the first place to deport Bishop and his followers for visa infractions. Police raids and immigration checkpoints turned into an ongoing pattern. Each time authorities confronted them, the group posted footage online, galvanizing supporters who believed Carbonation was being prosecuted for its beliefs. Bishop urged members to resist signing paperwork, staging defendant standoffs that sometimes ended in physical altercations with law enforcement. After being deported from Costa Rica, they found a temporary haven in South Mexico. Then wounded up in Belize, but their stay in Belize was simply short-lived. The local community resented Bishop's controversial online statements, and rumors swirled that he was a dangerous presence. Facing the possibility of legal action, they left abruptly. This hide-and-seek approach became Carbonation's norm. Members accepted the constant relocations as proof that their mission threatened powerful systems. During this phase, a woman known as Mama D joined. Nearly 60, she stood out among much younger members. She had a history of seeking spiritual truths through various communities. Not long afterward, she died under uncertain circumstances, officially due to a heart failure. Some suspected that Bishop's emphasis on natural remedies might have discouraged her from taking necessary medication. The group's secretive attitude towards her final hours fueled suspicion. Mamadi's daughter struggled to confirm what happened, seeing her mother's death as a warning sign that the group's avoidance of modern medicine could be lethal. As Carbonation wandered across Central America, internal strife grew. The group's leadership style, once dismissed by some as mere eccentricity, revealed more troubling features. Women said that if they disagreed with the bishop, he might scare them or publicly shame them. Men who questioned methods was exiled. Tales of forced fasting, group punishments, and humiliating cleaning rituals began to surface. The group preached environmental harmony. Their daily operations revolved around internet broadcasts designed to provoke, amuse, or shock viewers. In 2020, Bishop landed in Hawaii with about 20 followers, only to be arrested for violating the state's strict quarantine rules. Once more, he was jailed briefly, before being forced to leave. By then, A swirl of rumors followed Carbonation everywhere. Child endangerment, polygamy, violence. Mainstream media took notice. Coverage often labeled them a cult that roams paradise, leaving chaos in its wake. Bishop insisted these were orchestrated attacks by a racist system determined to crush Black revolutionaries. In late 2020, Bishop settled for a time in California and Nevada. Something in his messaging changed. While earlier he focused on environmental and racial themes, the new streams developed into dramatized brawls, highly personal rants, and sexual content. Instead of describing how to live in harmony with nature, he filmed fights between group members. Some believed the raw confrontation was staged to boost donations. Others suspected Bishop's mental health was deteriorating. The consistent rule was that he remained the undisputed leader, demanding complete loyalty. In 2020, a final move took the group back to Atlanta. Ironically, near the barber shop where Bishop once entertained customers with spiritual chatter. The modest suburban house became Carbonation's latest base. By that point, membership had dwindled. Many longtime followers departed, citing persistent abuse and the dissolution of the group's eco-spiritual ideals. The people who remained were among the most dedicated, or least able to leave. They broadcast their day-to-day life in that house, painting a picture of unshakable unity. Meanwhile, rumors about the bruises and forced sex circulated, posted by ex-members who said they were trying to warn newcomers. In March 2022, tension reached a boiling point at a house party Carbonation hosted. According to the statements later given to the police, a minor dispute between two women in a group spiraled into physical violence. One woman was told to leave immediately, but on her way out, Bishop called her back upstairs. That night, she testified Bishop forced a sexual encounter that she desperately tried to refuse. When she eventually escaped the next morning, she contacted law enforcement. Bishop allegedly posted explicit recordings of them online in the following days. The news spread quickly on social media. Reaction channels that had followed Carbonation for years erupted with commentary. Some watchers, who had poured over hours of Bishop's live streams, expressed no surprise. They insisted it was only a matter of time before he faced legal consequences. Others railed to his defense, claiming that the woman was exaggerating or seeking revenge. But a formal investigation began. By early April, police arrived at the Atlanta residence with an arrest warrant for rape, false imprisonment, and revenge porn. Bishop was taken into custody, held without bail. Some of his wives declared what they called systemic persecution, repeating the idea that powerful forces wanted to silence a rebellious Black leader. Yet, evidence pointed towards a different reality. Local authorities had grown concerned by a deluge of tips related to Bishop's alleged coercion, especially after the alleged victim provided details. In early 2023, Bishop's trial opened in Georgia courtroom. The prosecution argued that Bishop used psychological manipulation and physical intimidation and sexual pressure to dominate his followers. They framed the group's outward emphasis on spiritual alignment as a veil for a pattern of control and abuse. To illustrate this, they presented videos of Bishop's forceful monologues, clips that had once freely circulated online. Jurors saw him boast about disciplining women and scolding anyone who questioned his authority. Bishop's lawyers countered that these were consensual adults, willingly participating in unconventional relationships. They tried to cast a prosecutor's star witness as conflicted, pointing out that she had, at one point, praised Bishop online. The woman acknowledged that she initially felt deep affection for Bishop's message, but she told jurors that any appearance of consent was shaped by months of mental manipulations, culminating in the final night when she realized no meant nothing to him. Ex-members took the stand. They testified about the group punishment, extended confession sessions lasting hours. They recalled times when Bishop refused medical care for sick individuals, insisting nature would heal them. They described how the group revolved around Bishop's moods and how disputes often ended with alleged use of violence. The prosecution's goal was to prove that the environment made genuine consent impossible. After multiple days of testimony, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. In March of 2023, Bishop was sentenced to life without parole, plus an additional term. The observers were stunned by the harshness. Even some who believed he deserved punishment found the sentence severe. The judge justified it, saying Bishop showed up no remorse and had leveraged every opportunity for power. She called him a master manipulator, a man who weaponized spiritual rhetoric to facilitate personal gratification. For ex-members who once adored him, it was a bittersweet moment. Some felt vindicated, recalling how they had tried to expose Bishop's abuses for years. Others worried that society would conflate Bishop's twisted vision of Afrocentric spirituality with more legitimate movements. Many needed counseling or time to process the group's disintegration and the public scrutiny that came with it. With its leader locked away indefinitely, Carbonation fell into disarray. Remaining members struggled to function without Bishop's domineering leadership. Finances had already been tight. Donations dwindled, and supporters who once gave generously shifted their interests elsewhere. A small charade tried to relaunch under a new name, Imagination. Promising they learned from their mistakes, they spoke about continuing the dream of living closer to Earth, claiming Bishop's downfall shouldn't negate everything the group once stood for. Yet outside observers were skeptical. The group's brand was so tied to Bishop's persona that attempts to rebrand rang hollow. Many ex-members tried to rebuild independent lives. Some moved back home with relatives seeking normalcy. Others found solace in new spiritual circles. Most described a lengthy healing process, particularly those who alleged they'd been coerced or physically harmed. They spoke of nightmares, trust issues, and challenges of explaining to family and friends why they didn't leave earlier. It became a significant topic in online support communities for cult survivors, who recognized parallels with other groups where unquestioning devotion to a single authority figure turned toxic. Shortly after his sentencing, Bishop was transferred to a different facility. Early reports suggest he'd been stabbed by another inmate, though details remain sparse. Once recovered, his phone access was further restricted. During intimate calls, he clung to the idea that cosmic forces would liberate him. In his mind, his trial was a modern-day inquisition designed to silence Black men who challenged capital structures. He compared himself to leaders like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, ignoring how these figures devoted their lives to civil rights without the violent baggage that trailed him. He contended that the government had signaled him out, just as he targeted other flamboyant judges in the conscious community. Indeed, he wasn't the only one to face legal trouble. Rashid Jamal and brother Paul Light, similarly prominent in certain spiritual circles, were convicted of sexual charges. But critics pointed out that these men's downfall had less to do with speaking out against racism and more to do with the specific nature of crimes they were accused of. Carbonation's rise and fall spotlighted a larger ecosystem of bloggers, motivational speakers, herbalists, alternative historians, and self-proclaimed prophets. The so-called conscious community included some who are legitimate cultural critics, champions of self-improvement, or holistic health advocates. Others strayed into conspiracy-laden territory. The lines between tradition, innovation, and exploitation grew blurry in the social media era. Sociologists highlight how these networks can have a genuine value in exploring Afrocentric or indigenous knowledge, which has often been sidelined. But the same networks can incubate false prophets seeking personal gain. Internet's reach amplifies their ability to recruit and spread misinformation. It also fosters an echo chamber where dissenting voices can be labeled as traitors or against of the system. Bishop had once leveraged such tactics, branding any former member who spoke out as weak or brainwashed by Babylon. After Bishop's conviction, some ex-members found YouTube channels to discuss cult dynamics, using Carbonation as a prime example. Their aim was to caution others who might be tempered by charismatic leaders promising a utopia. They broke down the signs: love bombing, isolation from family, financial surrender, and sexual or physical control under the guise of spiritual discipline. Through these platforms, they tried to reclaim their voices, showing the world they were more than gullible victims. Yet, trauma still lingered. Certain members revealed difficulties with everyday tasks like choosing clothes or making grocery lists, as they'd become so accustomed to group dictates. Some responded panic attacks triggered by everyday stress, remembering how disagreements in Carbonation once led to screaming matches or worse. Therapists described it as a form of post-cult stress syndrome, requiring both professional help and supportive community to overcome. The Carbonation story underscores how legitimate desire to escape oppression and reconnect with nature can morph into a trap under their wrong leadership. The group's downfall also reveals how technology accelerates the influence and the unveiling of modern cults. Live-streamed content allowed them to recruit swiftly, but the same videos provided a catalog of Bishop's behavior. Supporters and critics alike remain struck by how online watchers effectively aided law enforcement, spotting and reporting questionable material. Many observers compare Carbonation to historical attempts by Black Americans to find liberation abroad, from the creation of Liberia in the 19th century to Marcus Garvey's Black to America movement. The notion of leaving oppressive environments is hardly new. But where earlier environments aimed for systemic nation building, Bishop's approach was deeply personalized around his own persona. That personification fostered unwavering devotion in some and revulsion in others. Consider Musa, a young musician who left near the end. He joined Carbonation expecting an eco-friendly revolution. He recalled sleeping outdoors under the bright moonlight, feeling a sense of cosmic connection he'd never known. But that feeling was undercut by nights when Bishop's rage filled the camp. Musa once watched Bishop berate a member for hours because he'd eaten outside the designated time. He admitted that for a while, he excused these incidents as tough love. Eventually, Musa's illusions fractured. He questioned why that their perfectly nature-centered life involved so much content creation aimed at financial gain, and why man preaching peace engaged in so much aggression. When he finally left, he felt both liberated and lost. The period after his exit was rife with anxiety, confusion, and need to piece together a personal belief system unattained by his time in the group. After the verdict, the suburban neighborhood where Carbonation had its final outpost is quiet. Neighbors recall the curious process of people becoming and going, the police raids, and the sense that something ominous simmered behind walls. Now, the only reminders are scattered items left behind. Quickly cleared out, the group's social media pages, once teeming with daily updates, are largely inactive. Occasional posters appear from remaining loyalties, who sometimes claim Bishop will be exonerated. For many ex-members, their journey has shifted to a quest for self-reliance. They still value plant to start a genuinely communal eco-projects, free from any single charismatic figure. Others choose to exist quietly, distancing themselves from public scrutiny, focusing on finding jobs, rebuilding family ties, and unlearning the patterns of submission they adopted. Experts who study high-control groups see Carbonation as an emblem of how modern cults form and how swiftly they can fall apart. Steve Hassan, a renowned figure in cult psychology, has pointed out that the internet allows leaders like Bishop to recruit across vast distances, but it also leaves them vulnerable to crowdsourced exposés. In this digital age, a single red flag broadcast can spark an online movement determined to hold them accountable. That feedback loop intensified both the leader's rise and eventual collapse. Carbonation's story also touches on the psychology behind such groups. The lure of a simpler, more harmonious life can blind individuals to warning signs. The sense of belonging, especially when framed as an escape from radical or economic injustice, is powerfully magnetic. Then piece by piece, personal freedoms get traded for communal unity until the group's rules override individual consensus. By the time a person realizes the depth of control, leaving might mean severing every tie. Today, years after Bishop first proclaimed he found the secret to living in harmony with nature, he resides in a locked facility, his visions of tropical freedom replaced by concrete and steel. He still professes his innocence, repeating claims of martyrism, but to many observants he stands as a cautionary tale. His saga highlights how real issues like racism, environmental degradation, and spiritual displacement can be weaponized by an individual determined to crave out power for himself. Ex-members often say that while their experiences were scarring, they are left with a nuanced understanding of Ethiopian thinking. The dream can be sincere, but under the sway of a domineering figure, it can become a nightmare. The meltdown of carbonation shattered illusions for those who believed leaving the United States would automatically free them from systemic ills. They learned that exploitation can follow you into the jungle if you don't address the roots of the abuse and power imbalances. Meanwhile, the broader consensus community continues in thriving in many corners, full of people exploring holistic living, cultural reconnecting, and empowerment. Yet, carbonation's collapse remains a sobering footnote. Some active voices in the community fear the lasting stain of Bishop's actions. They worry potential allies would lump them in with the authoritarian methods. Others suggest it was inevitable that figures as polarizing as Bishop would eventually face legal consequences. In the prison yard, under a sky that no longer suggests the endless horizons Bishop once sought, he sometimes speaks of having revelations. Surrounded by a barbed wire and concrete, he claims to be writing new techniques that will, in his words, enlighten the ignorant masses. But even among those who once saw him as a prophet, few now believe he'll walk free on the strength of that rhetoric. The lines of supporters who once petitioned for his release have thinned dramatically. The last holdouts occasionally post rehearsed videos of Bishop's earlier lectures, hoping to keep the flame alive. Their comment sections are a battlefield. Some call for him to remain behind bars. Others question his punishment was too severe. For critics, the record evidence of coerced relationships and physical violence speaks for itself. For believers, it's all part of a cosmic plan beyond mortal comprehension. And that's the end of carbonation. A movement that began with a call for reconnecting with oneself and nature ended up revealing how easily ideas can get distorted and corrupted when one person has all the unchecked power. Here's a thought worth sitting with. Eligio Bishop is not some internet eccentric. He's a part of this bigger pattern that we're seeing more and more of these days, especially on the internet. Charismatic leaders who are promising answers, community, and purpose end up gaining influence, particularly over the people who are looking for answers in a world that is often cold, callous, and stacked up against them. Just do a quick search, and you'll find some new age spiritual group, a sovereign citizen, or even a digital-only cult that is forming in real time, some with millions of followers. So the line between a healing place and a high control group is razor thin, and platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram are often used as the launchpads. What happened with carbonation is a cautionary tale, but it's also a mirror that shows us how human the need for belongingness really is, and how dangerous it could get when someone manipulates that need. Thank you for watching. See you next time.